Welcome to Change My Relationship podcast. I have with me today Zack Collie, and he is a marriage and family therapist. He works at Inspired Resolutions Counseling. And I interviewed Brandon Jaffe, who is the founder of Inspired Resolutions Counseling. We talked about dealing with your difficult teens, so you might recognize that name. But Zack today is going to talk about his own journey in learning how to be resilient through some pretty significant life changes. And we'd just like to present that topic to you because, as you'll see, resilience is something that all of us need as we deal with the life challenges that come our way. So welcome, Zack.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
So let's just start off. I like to hear about your childhood.
Yeah. So I am an Orange County boy, born and raised in Orange County, California, growing up, going to the beach, surfing, riding dirt bikes. I was a very outdoor, extroverted child. I'm the
Mhm.
oldest of four siblings. So I have two younger brothers, and the youngest is my little sister.
Okay.
And I played the role of the older brother very well growing up. I was definitely the problem child. My mom would tell me that I was more work on my own than my three younger siblings combined. And I was not an academic student, going to school. Um, I like to have fun, always being outside, hanging out with friends. Very, very social.
Okay. All right. So was your family a healthy family, or was there dysfunction, or
Yeah, I grew up, and I would say a very healthy family. My parents are still together; they're still married.
Mhm.
We would go to church on Sundays, and back then a family and siblings, we were close, but we got a lot closer later in life after my injury, which I'll share more about later.
Mhm.
But I would say I had a very good childhood growing up.
Yeah. So for the people listening who will ask me, often I get this question, are there any healthy families? Yes. There are degrees, obviously, but yes, there are healthy families. So that might be one of the reasons that you were able to do as well as you did through this really difficult experience. So now tell us what that injury was.
Yes. So in May 31st, 2010, it was Memorial Day. I was 15 years old and a freshman in high school. And it happened to fall on a Monday, which meant no school. So I was very stoked about that. Like I mentioned previously, I was not an academic student growing up. I always kind of struggled in school and got by. And I knew that after high school, that would be the end of my education. And so we had the day off, and I didn't have plans that day. And in the morning, I got a phone call from one of my best friends that I had grown up with. I knew him my entire life, and he asked me if I wanted to go to the beach. And I asked my parents if that is something I could do, and they said no because they had already had plans, and going to the beach, especially on that holiday, is very chaotic. There's lots of
Mhm.
traffic down there, and they already had something going on that day. So they said no. But one of the things about me is I was a very persistent child. If I wanted something, I usually found a way to get it. And so I ended up talking to my friend, and we convinced his mom to take us to the beach. And all I had to do was have my parents drop me off at his house. And so I asked
Wow.
them if they'd be willing to do that. And they said, okay. And my dad ended up taking me to my friend's house to drop me off. And on the way, he had a conversation with me about being careful.
Mm.
I think my parents knew that I was definitely um, the wild child. They were probably the most nervous about me and decisions that I would make.
Mhm.
And maybe a year prior to that, one of the pastors at my church that I grew up in broke his neck and got spinal cord damage. And
Whoa.
as my dad is driving me to my friend's house to drop me off, he brings up spinal cord injuries and neck injuries and diving. And as a 15-year-old kid, my mind is already thinking about the beach, being there with friends, not having any adults around, and
Mm.
we were going to meet up with some cute girls and just have a good day. So everything's going in one ear and out the other. And
Yeah.
I remember pulling up onto my friend's street and pulling up in front of his house. I opened the door and I said, "All right, Dad, I love you. I heard what you said. See you later." And that was the last time my dad saw me walking.
Whoa.
And we we get to the beach that day, and I remember the weather was really nice. Uh, we find the friends that we were meeting up with and kind of set up our towels. We put on sunscreen and run off into the water. And it was a great day. We were there all day. I remember the water was cold, but the sun was out.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're having a good time, time goes by fast. So it was almost like next thing I know, we got a call from my friend's mom that it was time to get picked up, and she was on her way from, I believe, Placentia. So it was about a 30, maybe a 45-minute drive. So we figured, hey, we got time to go in the water one more time. And because I remember the water being cold that day, my thought process was, I'm just gonna run into the water and just dive into a wave and submerge myself, get quickly used to the water as possible,
Yeah.
kind of just rip off the band-aid. And I remember standing up from the sand with my friend, and we just took off running towards the water together. I remember my feet in the hot sand, and as I got closer to the ocean, the sand got wet and cold, and then my feet hit the water, and I kind of got like that little chill that goes up your spine. And I saw this wave coming at me, and I figured, all right, that's the wave I'm gonna dive into. My friend was literally right next to me. We did the same thing, and I tucked my head down, put my arms out, and dove headfirst into this wave. Something that I've done hundreds of times going to the beach
Yeah.
growing up in Southern California. And I dove headfirst into this wave, and instantly, um, I got this weird sensation over my body. There was no pain, but I dove into the wave, and something was off. I just couldn't quite put my finger on it until when I tried to get up out of the water and I couldn't. And I remember floating face down in the water. I was still fully conscious. I didn't get knocked out or lose consciousness. And I remember just sitting there like, okay, what's going on? This is weird. Why can't I get up? And I tried to just move anything in my body, and nothing is working. And after a while, my brain goes back to that conversation that my dad was having with me in the car. And pretty soon it clicked. I realized I broke my neck. I just got paralyzed. And I thought this was a bad dream.
Yeah.
Part of me was like, this is a bad dream. Another part of me was like, no, this is not a bad dream. This is reality. And so I've always been a very kind of
Yeah.
solution focused, problem solving person.
Mm-hmm.
So even in this moment, as I'm floating face down the water, I wasn't even able to lift my head up out of the water to just to take a breath. And I remember thinking, I'm gonna die today at
Mm-hmm.
15 years old, and the only thing I can do is hold my breath for as long as my body will let me. And in those moments, I pretty much accepted that I was going to drown because I knew the type of kid that I was. And I figured my friends would look over at my body and think I was messing around, playing a joke. And by the time they realized something serious had happened, I would have inhaled water and drowned. And so in my mind, I was just thinking about all the things that I'm going to miss out on life, and that this is not fair that my life is going to end so early, and that I'm not going to get to say goodbye to my parents and tell them that I love them and apologize for how much trouble I caused them. And I had a conversation with God. I grew up in the church. That
Mm-hmm.
was something my dad kind of enforced in our family. It was never something I wanted to do Sunday mornings. I wanted to sleep in.
Of course.
I didn't like being woken up early and being dragged out to church, or if I slept over at my friend's house Saturday night, didn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. My parents would be there early Sunday morning to pick me up, and we go to church. And so I knew about God. He was definitely not a priority in my life. But in that moment, I was like, okay, God, if you're real, if everything that I've heard about you is true, I I need you to show up today. Please, please save my life. And I remember um, kind of what's the word? I remember telling him, if you save my life today, I'll go to church every Sunday the rest of my life. And so I don't know how long I was underwater. But after, having all of these conversations going through my head,
Yeah.
I got this weird kind of feeling on my back. It almost felt like someone came over and just kind of poked me. And it was my friend that had dove into a wave next to me. He popped up and saw my body floating face down and ran over to me and smacked me on my back. And when he did that, I had no reaction. I didn't flinch. I didn't
Yeah.
move, which was kind of odd in his head. And then he saw my body starting to float back out with the tide. And something told him in his head that something was wrong with me. And he went over to my body. He flipped me over out, out of the water. So I was facing the sun. And he dragged me by my arms out of the water onto the sand. And I remember being dragged and seeing my arms kind of above my head as he's pulling me out of the water. And we got to the sand and he let go of my arms and they flopped down to the ground like they weren't attached to my body. They were so heavy, but I could see that they were my arms. And I remember just trying to tell him, like, I can't move. I can't move. I'm paralyzed. But nothing was coming out of my mouth. I think my body must have been in shock because
Right.
there was no voice, there was no sound coming out. And I remember just kind of mouthing, like, I can't move. I can't move. And there was a very confused look on his face. And when I had dove into the sandbar and I hit my head, I bit my tongue. So there was some blood coming out of my mouth. And once he saw that, I think it clicked for him. And he ran and got the lifeguard. The lifeguard came over. And by then, the other people that we had met with came out of the water. And there was this kind of crowd around me trying to figure out what was going on. And the lifeguard, I just kind of kept saying the same thing, like, I can't move anything. I can't move. And so he ended up calling 911. And I remember just laying in the sand, staring straight up at the sun, waiting for help to come. And it was a very weird moment because there was a point where I could hear the ambulance in the far distance. And as it got closer, it got louder and louder. And it was weird because I knew it was coming for me.
Yeah.
And the paramedics came. They put me instantly into a neck brace. They lifted my body onto a stretcher on the sand and put me in the ambulance. I remember it smelled like a hospital. It was very cold in the ambulance.
Yeah.
And because we were underage, they didn't let my friend come with me. So from my friend's perspective, his friend just dove into a wave and he pulled him out and he wasn't moving. And ambulance came and picked him up and took him off to the hospital.
And he had no idea what's going on.
No idea what was going on, where I was even going. And I ended up being transferred. I went straight to Hoag Hospital. And that was kind of where my memory ends. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital with a tube down my throat that was helping me breathe. It was after they did surgery. I shattered my C4 vertebrae and I had spinal cord damage. I was diagnosed as a quadriplegic, which meant I have paralysis in my upper and lower limbs.
Right.
And I remember waking up and there was this tube in my throat and I couldn't move anything, but I was trying to push it out with my tongue. And there was a nurse in the room and she said, I'm going to go get the doctor. The doctor came in and was like, Zach, I know this is very uncomfortable, but if this is what's helping you breathe right now and we don't know the severity of your injury, I can take it out for you. But if I take it out and you can't breathe, I'm going to have to put it back in while you're awake and it's going to be extremely uncomfortable. So blink once if you want me to take it out, blink twice if you want me to leave it. And so I blinked once and I was like, take this thing out of me. And I remember him pulling this tube out of my mouth that was like never ending. It made me think of, there's this image in that movie Mary Poppins when she's pulling this lamp out of her little briefcase.
Like, where does it come from?
It's like it's not stopping, right? So that was kind of what was going through my head. Thankfully, the tube came out. I was able to breathe on my own, and that's when the doctor kind of shared with me what had happened. And he's like, "I'm gonna go get your parents." My parents came in. It was the first time that I got to see them, and I remember just like crying because I didn't know if I would ever see them again. And in that moment, that's all that mattered to me, was that I was alive
Mhm.
and that I was with my parents. And then came the bad news. The doctors came in with my parents, and they had already told my parents, I think, what had happened, but this was the first time I had heard the information, and that it was very bad. I had spinal cord damage. I was a quadriplegic, and that I would probably never walk again. And as a 15-year-old kid, and I was a very kind of stubborn mind, and people could tell me like what to do or what not to do, and I would, do it anyways or not believe them or prove them wrong. So I didn't believe the doctors. I also I didn't understand the reality
Oh,
of what a spinal cord injury was.
yeah.
I didn't even know. I thought if you broke your neck, you die. I didn't know that you could break your neck and still live.
Uh-huh.
And after that, I remember just asking the doctor to leave just to be with my parents, and that was kind of the start of my new life. Now being paralyzed in a wheelchair.
So it does sound like you had an awful strong will, which I'm sure helped you. But what was that from that point until you could, I mean, you had to go through grieving, you had to
Mhm.
get all the way to acceptance. I mean, I'm sure there was anger. Just talk a little bit about that grief process that you went through.
Yeah, I probably experienced every emotion possible, and I there was a moment in the hospital. I remember this like it was yesterday, where I had this internal conversation with myself about what were my options.
Hmm.
After being told by doctors that you have 1% chance of ever walking again, and at the time I was paralyzed completely from my neck down. I could move nothing below my neck. I had lost all the feeling and sensation in my body. So I saw what I couldn't do, and no matter how hard I tried to move anything, nothing would work. And this felt it almost felt too big to overcome. So my first thought was, what's the point of even trying? Because I have no control over what's going on. And I had this self talk where I wanted to at least figure out what my options were before I gave up. And I ended up coming to two conclusions. I knew I could give up, and I could be angry, I could be bitter, I could feel sorry for myself, and I could just give up from the beginning and not even try because it felt too hard. Or I could push forward, I could suck it up, and I could figure out what do I still have control over, and what are my options are moving forward. Ultimately, it was I could get bitter or I could get better. And I don't know how, as a 15-year-old, that was my mindset,
Hmm.
but I think my injury really kind of opened the door for me to build resilience and realize how strong of a will I had. And I think that was kind of step one of me slowly starting to build resilience, was in that moment choosing, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to figure things out, even though I have no idea how I'm going to do that or what it's going to look like.
Could you define resilience for people that are listening?
Yeah, I think resilience to me is our ability to push through difficult circumstances, no matter how big they are,
Hmm.
and to ultimately move forward. One of my favorite words is the word perseverance, and I think perseverance and resilience go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Perseverance is more of the action
Hmm.
to wake up every day, and to move forward with a smile on our face, no matter our circumstances. And then resilience is what's built and kind of the result of choosing to persevere. And I don't think, had I not chosen to do that, there's no way I would have made it to where I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talk about resilience is a choice, and resilience is also a skill that we learn and that we ultimately should learn in childhood. So there are specific things that parents can do raising their children that will help their children to be resilient. And I think of resilience, like you said, like being able to just kind of weather life's storms, to handle life's challenges, and not, like you said, not just give up or say that I can't do it. And you can see that in people when you're, talking with people about problems, that some people, part of it's personality, part of it is the skill. It can be learned no matter how old you are late in life. if you're listening and you say, I don't know what that is, like I'm overwhelmed by whatever happens to me and I feel stuck. This message is for anyone, not just somebody with a serious physical illness, but even battling a serious life problem or, any challenge that you're dealing with. So it is applicable to everyone. So also, before your injury, as you described, you were young, you were independent, you were kind of stubborn, strong-willed,
Mhm.
doing everything for yourself. All of a sudden, you are dependent. How hard was it for you to allow people to help you and to ask them to help you?
That was probably the hardest thing that came from my injury. I I tell a lot of people to be honest, the injury itself was not the hardest part. It's
Mm,
the secondary complications that came from having a spinal cord injury. I think I was able to move forward quicker, accepting not being able to walk, than it was for me to accept all the help that I now needed for things that I used to be able to do on my own.
mhm,
And growing up, I was a very independent kid. Um, I liked to do things on my own. I didn't like asking for help. I liked to try to figure things out. And my parents told me, you were the kid that would have had your bags packed by the front door the day of your 18th birthday, ready to move out and just go experience life. And so one day I'm independent, and the next day I'm paralyzed and 100% dependent on other people helping for me, helping me with daily little things.
yeah,
And I lost everything pretty much. I lost the ability to dress myself. I lost the ability to go use the restroom. When my injury didn't just affect my physical abilities, it affected my internal stuff, my bowel, my bladder functioning. I had to have help doing that stuff. I had to go back, and it was almost like I reverted being back to an infant body, but being in a 15 years old. So
with
I
a
had to have my
15-year-old mind and
yeah,
awareness.
exactly. So my parents had to shower me. They had to see me naked again. They had to dress me. They had to, pop pimples on my face and help me do my hair. At the time, I couldn't feed myself. And it was that was just so hard for me, was to accept the help. But at the same time, I was grateful that I had the help. I
Yeah.
had parents that were willing to put their life on hold to help to help me with all these things.
Well, were you in rehab for a while in the hospital? Like there must have been physical therapy and all kinds of stuff. Were you like there for several months?
Yeah, so I was in the ICU at the hospital for 2 weeks, and after I was discharged from the hospital, I then went straight to a rehabilitational center. It was a place called Casa Clina in Pomona, California.
Mhm.
Very lucky because it's a beautiful facility with great staff. I was very lucky to go there because there are other options that I knew of, but heard some scary stories about. So I went to Casa Clina
Good.
for rehab for about 3 to 4 months. And that's where I pretty much learned to navigate my new life, now living in a paralyzed body, where I did physical therapy, I did occupational therapy. I learned as much as I could during that time there. And then insurance only would cover a certain amount of time. And after
Uh-oh.
that, you're released and you go back home and you figure it out. Everything's on you now.
So is that where did your speech come back pretty quickly, or did you actually have to learn to use your breath to get your speech back?
My speech eventually came back. I didn't have to relearn how to talk. It was more so the injury also affected my diaphragm and my
Mhm.
breathing and my lung strength. So that was actually one of the exercises that I had to do. Was I remember I had this like little plastic device that I blow into, and you had to keep this little ball at a certain level, and it was to re-strengthen my lungs. So at the very beginning, my voice was very low. I couldn't talk for long periods of time because I would
Mhm.
get very lightheaded. Um, but there was more so just kind of like that retraining that lung strength rather than retraining how to
How to
talk.
talk. And then
Yeah.
you have some use of your hands, I can see. So is that where you got that back? Did you have to learn that, or did that spontaneously come back when your body kind of recovered?
So in the beginning, your body's in shock,
Yes.
and a lot of my functioning came back over time. I wouldn't say I got a lot of what I have now because of the physical therapy, but that was something that was very stressed as important by the doctors.
Hmm.
Do as much physical therapy as you can within the first year. You're going to get back the most function in the first year, and so that was kind of burned into our brains. So PT was my pretty much my only focus the first year of my injury. I can move my arms now, but I have zero function in my hands and wrists.
Okay.
I can't move my wrists. I don't have those fine finger motor functions. That unfortunately never came back.
Okay.
Thankfully, sensation did come back. So even though I'm paralyzed and I can't move, I still have feeling throughout my body, which is a huge thing.
Yeah.
People don't. I think one of also the things my injury made me realize was how much I had taken for granted.
Hmm.
And it's hard. I say that, and to other able-bodied people, and it's hard for you to understand things that you take for granted, um, that you have, that you don't lose unless you go through something as severe like this. So
Right.
for me, I didn't understand how important it is to have feeling in your body, because when that's taken away, you can get pressure sores, which are things I had never learned about
Hmm.
until my injury. And if your pant leg is tucked a weird way, that it's going to bother your body, but you just can't feel it. Or if your foot is turned slightly in an uncomfortable position, there's all these things that
Yeah.
you just learn, that I learned after my injury, that I had never given a thought about before. Um, Bowel and bladder function and UTIs and all these things. It was a major shift for me, and it made me realize, oh my gosh, all these little things that I never thought about that I could even lose, ended up being huge for me.
Wow. That is, yeah, you're right. We take all that for granted until you lose it, and then you realize how important it is. But it's also made you grateful, having lost all of those things and getting them back. I hear a lot of gratitude in your,
Yeah, I
so
think that's one thing I want to touch on, and I think because this is important for anyone to hear going through anything in their life, is the importance of gratitude. And that is one thing my injury has absolutely taught me,
yeah,
is that no matter what you're going through, there are still things you can be grateful for. You just have to look for them. And it may be hard. And I know for me in the beginning, I was like, I don't, there's nothing to be grateful for. I'm freaking paralyzed and I can't do anything. My life is over. I am going to be dependent on someone for the rest of my life. You have all these negative thoughts going through your head, and it's so easy to just focus on those. And it's so much harder to be positive in the midst of suffering. And over years, this took a long time for me to learn. Um, but gratitude will change your life no matter what season you're going through. And I think gratitude has actually literally rewired my brain to where
it
even
does.
though my circumstances have not changed, I'm still paralyzed, I'm still in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
I'm such a positive and happy person. There's so many things that I am grateful for despite my current circumstances.
Yeah.
And that's something I emphasize with my clients: practicing gratitude, writing down 3 things we're grateful for every single day, no
Right.
matter how small, no matter how big. It will rewire your brain. And for me now, I wake up, and even though I wake up every day, the first thought goes through my head. The first thing that I'm reminded of is that I'm paralyzed. I can't get out of bed until my caregiver comes and gets me out.
Yep.
And so my mind can go to, every single day I wake up, I'm paralyzed. I'm going to be negative and I'm going to focus on that. Or I wake up, I'm alive. I can breathe. It's a new day. It's a
Yeah.
fresh start. And now my brain is automatically trained to think about the positive things
That
versus going to the negative.
it sounds so simple, but when you have your circumstances where you're comparing, I'm paralyzed, I can't move versus I'm alive and it's a new day, the contrast is really does teach a powerful lesson about gratitude. And I know that there's even research that has been done about the physical healing that
Mhm.
gratitude can do in your body, how it can change your your stress levels, your cortisol levels. It can cause inflammation to go down. I mean, it really has a even a physical effect. So you've spoken about patience being an essential part of resilience. What were some of those hardest lessons in patience that you had to learn, and how did that shape your mindset going forward?
Prior to my injury, I was probably one of the most impatient people out there. I did not like waiting for things. I think that was kind of tied to my independence because I could just do what I wanted when I wanted, and I would get that gratification or I'd get the results that I wanted. It was very hard for me just to sit still and wait for things. And so when I was after my injury, I didn't have a choice. I had to be patient, and I could either fight it or I could just accept it. And I think that was also a big role, was accepting the things that I can't change,
Mhm.
which was my injury. And when people are able to accept the things that are out of their control, accept the things they cannot change, it makes life so much better. And it allows you to put all that time and energy and focus to the things that you can control. And
Yes.
that's a major game changer.
Yeah.
And patience has played a major role in my life following my injury. It allowed me to really slow down
Mhm.
and be present. I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, is they're either so caught up in the past and they're not moving forward, or they're so anxious and focused on the future and they're not in the here and now, which is the part of our life we have control over. And
Absolutely.
like I kind of already said, it really allowed me to shift my focus from
Mm.
what I lost, which was so much, to what I still had. And even though my circumstances haven't changed, I'm grateful that my parents they don't have to go and visit a gravestone every May 31st, and that I'm still alive with them, even though I'm in a wheelchair.
And you're doing
Um,
so much good with your life, and we'll talk about that later. And that is powerful. That's another
mhm.
amazing thing that you gain from resilience, is that you can take the negatives, like you said, and turn them into positives. So,
And one more thing I just want to say one more thing about patience is
mhm,
that it's not only just helps, I think, me as a person, but it's come out into other areas of my life as well. I think learning to be a patient person has made me a better husband. It's made me a better therapist. It's made me a better listener. It's made me a better dad. Patience, it impacts multiple areas of your life. And I'm extremely grateful for that, because it's really helped with just relationships and my overall life.
yeah, wow. So let's see. A lot of people struggle with control, especially when they're hit with those hardships. Um, did you kind of talked about some of the things you tried to control, but do you have anything else to say about letting go of control?
I would say life is hard for everyone.
Mhm.
And there's going to be times where you struggle and you want to control things you can't control. And I remember hearing this kind of quote where it said, you know, you can't always control the card that life deals you, but you can choose how you play those cards.
Mhm.
And I remember for me that even though my injury does not define who I am, but I'm defined by how I respond to those circumstances.
True.
So I think that played a major role for me, in that I responded to what I could still do and what I could control with my injury. And I didn't focus on all the things that I couldn't do. And it was very hard because I wanted to be able to control all these things that I couldn't control. But ultimately, that's not going to help me. It's not going to help me get better. It's not going to help fix what I'm going through. And my mindset was, I want to move forward. I want to create a future for my life. And in order for me to do that, I got to accept the things that I can't control, and then I got to just focus on what I can. I got to move forward
Yeah,
ultimately.
and
And
that is part of resilience, because we were talking a little bit before we started, and I said I usually, like, I look at myself, I'm naturally a resilient person because of my personality. But one of the things is that when I'm hit up with a problem, my first thought, no matter what it is, okay, what can I do about it? And so it's to move into action, and it's to figure out like something. And what that does is that keeps me from getting depressed and hopeless because I'm action oriented. And
Mhm.
resilient people are action oriented, they're problem solvers. So when something happens, they automatically think, what can I do about this? Where are my resources? Where can I go get help? What kind of help do I need? And what are the options? And when you can put yourself into motion and do something about it, that's the opposite of feeling hopeless and depressed. So that is part of resilience, is
Mhm.
being able to problem solve no matter what's coming toward you. So
Yeah, I think
absolutely.
that's great. And the opposite of that, which I think what most a lot of people struggle with, is they try to control the things they can't control,
Yeah,
which automatically just makes them stuck. You're
right.
never going to be able to move forward, you know, and figure things out, trying to focus on something that you can't control.
And that could be like a lot of people listening to me are people that are in really dysfunctional, difficult, or even toxic relationships. And they spend so much time trying to change the other person or change the circumstance, or feeling disappointed and even, devastated over the fact that this is their relationship, or this is their life, or this is what they're enduring. And by trying to force that person to change or force the circumstances to change, they don't turn it around and look at themselves and say, okay, what can I do? And that often is a combination of
Mhm.
acceptance and then figuring out boundaries about what isn't acceptable. And it's easier to try to control circumstances rather than go through that whole process of acceptance and just say, okay, I'm going to accept that these are the things I can't change. And now what can I change? Well, that might be setting a boundary
Yeah,
to take care
yeah.
of
I,
myself.
accountability is hard. I
Yeah.
think that's one thing that kind of came up in my head as you were talking is you gotta hold yourself accountable for these things. And
Yeah.
the only person you have control over is yourself.
Yep.
You can't change, you can't control other people. I think you can model and you can encourage other people, but
Hmm.
ultimately when you try to change someone else, I think that's when you cross the line of trying to control something that you don't have control over. And ultimately it's just gonna make things a lot more difficult for you.
Yeah. And then they say insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Yeah.
So I often say we get to the point of insanity where we have to go back to the second step of the 12 steps, which is asking God to restore us to sanity. And sometimes that's recognizing there's things that we cannot change. So I know that you live by a certain motto. Would you mind sharing that with us and tell us how you apply that?
Yeah. So this has been a life-changing model for me. And I would love to share where I heard it. Because I remember being in high school, I want to say I was a sophomore. And I was sitting in my history class, and I was kind of checked out that day. Like I said a little earlier, I wasn't the best student, and I wasn't fully listening to lecture. But I just remember my teacher saying these three words that have burdened my brain and have helped me get through very difficult seasons of life. And the three words that he said were improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Wow.
And I think that is the mindset of a resilient person.
Hmm.
And I remember I've remembered those words to this day. And I literally feel like those words have played a role in me getting to where I am today and not giving up. And that's just been my mindset. No matter what life throws at me, no matter what I'm going through, how I'm feeling. All right, Zach, improvise, adapt, and overcome. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. Keep going, keep going.
Yeah.
And
And
it's just so powerful.
and you have to do a lot of improvising and a lot of adapting. But I mean, and I'm just looking at your beautiful smile that you have
Yeah.
on your face. It doesn't look like it's forced. It looks like it's just a part of who you are. And I mean, to be able to overcome that, and um, you're married, you have kids, you did get a master's degree and a bachelor's degree in marriage family therapy, and you all those hours. So please tell us how all that came to be.
It's really amazing how God can turn tragedy into triumph. In the Bible, it says God works all things together for our good.
Hmm.
But I think the second part of that is if you let him. You know,
Yeah.
I could have closed all the doors that God opened for me,
Yeah.
if I wanted. And I think just letting go of all of that anxiety, all of what I can't control, and just putting my faith in him, he has shown up more in my life than I ever imagined. And I tell people all the time, I truly believe I have accomplished more in my life right now than I would have accomplished in my entire previous life had my injury never happened. After I broke my neck, um, I never planned on going to college, but
Hmm.
God opened that door for me. I got a wheelchair scholarship, and I really felt like if I was going to build any future for my life, now that all my physical capabilities were taken away, I had to have an educated mind. And so I went to college. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I was probably the least expected person in my family to go to
Yeah.
college. And I got my bachelor's degree, and I still didn't feel like that was it for me, but I had no idea what I was going to do next. And I kind of realized, or I found out that my school had a master's in counseling program,
Mhm.
which during my bachelor's program, I took this class that changed my life. And in that class, I had that light bulb moment of um, one of the things I struggled with after my injury was what am I going to do as a career? How am I going to support myself? How am I going to make money to survive? And I knew I had my brain and voice, so I tried. I didn't know how I could use those two things in order to do that. And my light bulb moment was, you know what? I still have my brain. I have my voice. I could be a counselor. I could be a therapist. And that was, I knew in my heart, whatever I did, I wanted to help other people. But
Mhm.
during that season of life, I didn't know how I was going to do that. And then in that light bulb moment, I got that question answered, and I knew you're going to become a therapist. And so I started looking at programs, and my school had one, and I threw all my eggs into one basket. I only applied to that master's in counseling program, which I came to found out was extremely competitive.
Mm.
The master's in counseling program at Cal State Fullerton is a program they are known for. So they told me they get about 400 applications, and they only accept about 65 to 70 max. So I was already like, oh my gosh, the odds are against me. I didn't have the best grades, but I had some pretty good written letters of recommendation, and I had a pretty good personal statement. And I said, God, if this is the path that you have for me, I know you'll make it work out. If it's not, if I get denied, I'll figure it out then. I don't,
Mm.
I don't, I don't need to know. And then, thankfully, I got accepted, and I got a master's degree in counseling. I moved out of my parents' house. I live in an apartment on my own. Um, I met my wife a few years ago on a dating app, and we got married in October. We'll be celebrating our 2-year wedding anniversary this October. I became a stepdad. She has a daughter from a previous marriage,
Okay.
and we just had our daughter together. Our
Oh,
daughter will be 1 year old on the 29th of this
wow.
month. And it's just been absolutely mind blowing how amazing my life is. And
Wow.
my faith is as strong as it's ever been. My injury has really um, actually brought me closer to God. And I'm just completely grateful.
Wow. That is quite a story. That is so, so, so just encouraging to people that are
Mhm.
listening. So, what, how do you incorporate this? I know you go and you speak to high school students, right, about
Mhm.
resilience. Is that something that you want to be invited to more high schools? Is that like a goal of yours or churches? Who are you speaking to?
Yeah, high schools and churches and whoever would be interested. I've always felt like God had a plan for me to share my story and my
Mhm.
testimony. And Brandon and I have created a really good speech on um, building resilience through perseverance,
Mhm.
where we talk about my story,
Mhm.
we talk about mental health, and I think I have my heart. I love working with teens. I love working with young adults. I think high schoolers they're in such a important stage of life where they need to hear these things
Yeah.
because they're finding out who they are, they're finding their own identity, um, and I think high school is kind of where you you go down that path of knowing who you are, or you go down that path of being kind of lost. And my hope is that my story will help plant seeds and guide them down that path of who they are and how they can be resilient, and the importance of persevering when life gets hard. And so, we do these speeches, and
Mhm.
we're trying to get more bookings, and
Okay.
it's something I love doing. Public speaking absolutely terrifies me. It still does,
No,
but I push that aside
you're so
because I
good.
know that's what everyone says, that it's so funny. But oh my gosh, man, they say a lot of people fear public speaking more than death, and
Uh-huh.
for me, it is very scary. But
Uh-huh.
when I am up there on stage, all of it goes away.
Uh-huh.
And when I finish and I get feedback, it feels so good.
It's
So
like the best thing ever, right?
it
That's my
is.
favorite thing that I do out of my entire ministry is to teach to a live audience and have feel their response and just everything going on with the audience, and then afterwards to know that it impacted people. It's just like bring it on.
Yeah.
So,
And one of the things I also do that I don't know of any therapist that's doing is I run a spinal cord injury therapy group. And
yeah,
I remember when I was injured at 15 years old, I didn't go see a therapist because I didn't want to talk to someone that didn't understand what I was going through.
sure.
And I couldn't find anyone that did that. And I tried a few support groups, and it didn't help. And so I feel like I'm in a very unique position,
Yeah.
having a spinal cord injury and having the education and training to be a mental health therapist. And the spinal cord injury community is near and dear to my heart, and so that's something I am trying to build, and I want to give back and help either newly injured individuals or individuals that have been injured for a while that are struggling, that can be counseled by someone
Mm-hmm.
that understands.
Yeah. And now, is that on Zoom or
Yes, it's online. It's over
okay,
Zoom. Right
just
now,
for
it's
California?
just for California, because as a therapist, you can only
Yeah.
practice in the state that you are licensed,
Mhm.
or have your education. So hopefully, maybe in the future that they'll change that, because
I
I know
hope
I'd be able
so.
to reach so many more
I
people in other
know.
states. But unfortunately, I'm
Yeah.
limited to only California.
Yeah. I feel like that's a real something that really holds back access to therapy for a lot of
Yeah,
people. A lot of people are in states where they don't know how to access the therapy, and that get it like there's so many ministries online like mine where you want to be able to say here's a therapist, but because people are all over, then they can't access that therapist, including people even in Europe not being able, they don't have a lot of therapy there, and Africa. And so being able to have access to therapists here would be invaluable.
yeah,
So I know you've already said that you incorporate resilience with your teens and that type of thing. And I'm sure that them teens, there's probably a rapport you can have with your teen clients when they look at you and you go, you're the real deal. Like, that you've gone through stuff. And so you have overcome. And I'm sure that that's really builds rapport with them
mhm.
and influence. So yeah.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
they don't know I'm in a chair until they walk in and sit down with me. So I'm sure it's kind of a surprise, but I feel like I'm in a very interesting position where I think because I'm in a wheelchair, I'm less threatening and I'm
Yeah.
more trustworthy. And
Yeah.
when it's appropriate, I do self-disclosure, because I feel like,
Uh,
I'm human too, and I've gone
yeah.
through difficult times, and that's stuff that, when it's right, I think it's important to share, because that builds rapport and trust
Yeah.
and safety in sessions
Yeah, and
with my clients.
it also would be kind of like, hey, what happened to you? And I know
Mhm.
therapists have that line where you're not supposed to give like all that personal information, but they're wondering. And so if you don't tell them when they're wondering or they're asking, then that doesn't build trust. So it almost seems like, yeah, I agree with you that you'd almost have to, otherwise it would feel like it wasn't like that rapport wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So What's one lesson that you've learned with your experience that you wish everyone understood about facing hardships?
Embrace difficulty. Be
Break,
happy about it
be
because
happy about it.
it makes you better, it makes you stronger, and it's how you grow. You can't grow if you are in living in a bubble of security and safety.
Mm,
I think that is one of the biggest things I've learned is the way we grow in life is to get out of our comfort zone. And one of my favorite verses in the Bible um, is Romans 5, 3 through 5. And it says, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And we need to have hope to hold on to. And for me, right there, suffering produces perseverance. That's
yep.
all I need to hear.
And
Hard times
perseverance,
make us
hope. You're
stronger.
right. Yeah, hard times make you
Yeah.
stronger. And then if you don't persevere through it, then you don't have hope.
Yeah.
You do feel hope.
And I would not be where I am today if I did not push myself outside of my comfort zone and do things that scared the crap out of me, or were extremely uncomfortable, such as
Exactly.
public speaking.
Yeah.
But I am a better person because of it,
Wow.
and it's carried me so much farther in life. If I were to reject it or
Yeah.
deny opportunities.
Well, and I know
Yeah.
like when we talk about your therapy group just in California, but your speaking can be anywhere. And with
Mhm.
Zoom, you could even be like people listening to this, they could invite you into their church via
Yeah.
Zoom or into their youth group via Zoom. And I mean, there would be all kinds of opportunities for you to speak where you didn't even have to physically go fly there. So I hope that this does generate some opportunities for that. I think your story is amazing and it's powerful and it, like we said, it applies to everyone. So how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I have a Psychology Today account, Zack
Okay.
Collie, if you want to look me up as a therapist. If you're in California, I do have to reemphasize that because unfortunately I can't do any therapy outside California. I have a YouTube channel, Zack
Okay.
Collie. I don't post on there anymore, but for many years I posted daily living as a quadriplegic. I have a video of my story on there on how I became a quadriplegic. And you can give me a follow on Instagram, Zack Collie 7. Reach out to me if you have any questions or would like to book anything. I'd
Mhm.
love to talk with you and possibly come share my story.
Okay. And then also through the Inspired Resolutions Counseling website, which I will put all of those in the notes, and then they can reach you that way. So should be really daily living as a quadriplegic. It doesn't matter if the posts are older, if that would help somebody, it would be, good for them to go back and look at that. So thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing your story. And I know it's going to bring encouragement and hope to so many that are listening. And I'm just thinking of people as we're talking that I'm going to like flag to make sure that they listen to it. So God bless you. Thank you. And I think life is going to bring many, many good things your way.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate our conversation together.
You're welcome. So thank you for listening and watching. And I just suggest if you can think of somebody that would be encouraged by this, please forward that to them. And we look forward to you the next time. God bless.